want to start a video with what's up, guys, but Charles here, back in Function Factory Performance and Racing, and today we're going to be filming a exhaust install on a Ferrari F12, and the exhaust system we'll be using is Fi exhaust, and holy moly, this thing is really pretty. You know, we'll be pretty quick about the install. We'll be decently detailed, but most of these videos are pretty much for fun. We're still filming on the phone here, so I'm gonna flip the phone around and I'll talk about the exhaust. Wow, look at this, guys. Holy moly. So this is the Fi system for the Ferrari F12. It's got a muffler on one side and it's got a straight pipe on the other, so it is valved. And in the back, we do have our X pipe. I'm hoping for some incredible sounds from this exhaust because I believe the car is too quiet stock. But here's the real exotic, guys. That's the real one. We're gonna do a lap in the car and get the stock sound. We'll rev the car. We'll have some in-car sounds as well, and see if there are any different exhaust modes on the car, as I haven't driven an F12 in a hot minute. So, all right. Cool off, and then we'll start showing you guys the disassembly of the OEM exhaust. All right, guys, so just like the last car we did, I'm going to show you the lift points on this F12 here, just like I showed on the other car. So here we go. Alex says they're weird, so we'll check it out. All right, we're taking a look at the Ferrari F12 lift points. So really far inward. I mean, obviously this V12 is extremely heavy, so we've got a lift point here. I like how they don't hide them. And we've got our rear lift point here, and then I'll step out. And you know, I wanna share this info, guys, because I YouTube shit all day and I can't find it. So I wanna share it with you guys, the stuff that I have trouble finding. So those are the lift points, and then we'll take a look at the stock exhaust, and I'll put the camera back on the gimbal. So, okay, let's start at the front of the car. Here's our massive V12. There's some cats in there somewhere. And then here is your, I'm sure these are resonators here. And then let's go to our back section. So we've got to pull all this paneling off here. Not much you can see, guys. And then here's our stock tailpipes. But yeah, not much you can see without the paneling off.
We're just gonna start by pulling the rear sections of the fender liners. Very simple. You need a clip removal tool and a T30 Torx. So I'm gonna go ahead and start by pulling this first clip right here. 2, 3, 6. Once you have this liner loose, you'll be able to pop it out at the top, and then you'll be able to slide it up and get to this final bolt behind the sway bar. You'll be able to pull this around the sway bar, just like that.
Now, as you guys see, that gives us access to the stock muffler, and we'll line up the stock muffler with the Fi system. We guys show you guys the exact difference. And if you guys don't know about Ferrari, they use vacuum actuators. As you can tell right there, there's your vacuum source, there's your diaphragm, and then there's your valve there. And you know, personally, I do like the electronic valves better than this stuff, but who knows why they do this stuff. So while Alex keeps pushing behind me, our AC is dead, and we've got the mobile response team unit here in the shop. And Luke is on top of the roof right now, fixing the office AC. Good times.
The final thing in the wheel well, there is one 10mm bolt right here in the corner that you're gonna wanna remove. Once that's removed, we can move on to the bottom. Depending on which ones you took out when you pulled the liner, there should be 5 T30 Torx along basically the front of the diffuser here. They're the same as the ones in the wheel well. And then after you've got all these removed, we'll move on to the top and I'll explain how to remove that. All right, so I've already got this removed, but I'll go ahead and explain the procedure. When you find this, it'll have these little plastic covers on all these small bolts. Those pop up with a screwdriver or trim tool. Underneath, they have a 2.5mm Allen head. You remove the 5 of those. This pries up straight. It engages these clips right here along the bumper with these tabs on this trim piece. Once that's off, underneath here, there will be 5 more T30 Torx bolts. And then that frees up the top of the bumper here. The remaining clips will be along the top of the taillight and the edge of the bumper. I'm gonna go ahead and mask this area just so that while we're removing it, we don't make any scratches on the paint. And then we'll go ahead and plug the marker lights and the reverse camera, as well as the license plate lights. And then we'll go ahead and get this set up on a stand and we'll be able to start removing the stock exhaust.
All right, guys, so I'm sure you saw we had a little bit of a struggle with this, but just to note, there is a master disconnect under all of the accessories in the trunk, so we'll show you that as well. But check those out. Those are the plugs you need to pull. So we did put everything back together, so no need to disassemble any of this harness, just the camera. What is this? We got the rear light harness.
This is the camera.
Okay.
And then this is for all the lighting and backup sensors.
So you got the camera and you've got your sensors on this master disconnect. And to give you guys a wide view, when you do pull the bumper, there are 3 hidden tabs right here. So these tabs you cannot see. I put my finger right here and I pulled with very firm pressure and all these 3 will pop out. Obviously, when it does pop out, it will fall down, and this bumper does weigh a lot because there are ducts in here. These plastic ducts right here do weigh a lot. So you're gonna wanna put a blanket down or you're gonna want a friend to help you. But if you've done this job plenty of times, then go ahead and do it by yourself. We're bringing the car down now so you can see the rear section of it. So you can see the stock exhaust, much larger than our Phi, so the car is gonna definitely pick up some massive volume there. And we wanna show you where the disconnect is. So it runs into here, runs into this little hole right here. And then as we get to the trunk section, guys, gonna lift this up. This glue has failed on this car here. This is the OEM toolkit.
5 T25 Torx holding this in.
Running a little wide.
Once we lift this up, your connectors are right here, right inside of where the grommets pass through the body.
So, and just to make sure there's no confusion, that is a blue connector and there's a green connector there. So you're gonna wanna disconnect those, pull your grommet through, and it'll come out that end. What do we got next, Alex?
Start disassembling the exhaust.
So just to note, guys, when you lift these cars, you gotta make sure that this panel, if you're pulling it, cannot be underneath your lift pads, which is extremely easy to do because obviously there's only so much room you have. So after a couple attempts, we got it. Let's check out the rear end of this car as we've been doing with other cars, just kind of going through it. You've got the transmission in the back. Let's see what else. This subframe is absolutely wild. So we got pretty big mufflers here. We'll put the OEM system down. Big LCAs. Looks like stock coilovers. You can actually adjust the height. That's pretty cool. There are the vacuum actuators for your valves. Look how tiny this thing is. So if the valve is shut, it has to flow through this thing. Look at this tiny exhaust pipe. When the valve is open, obviously you've got this, looks like 2 3/4 piping right here. And let's see this section right here. So it looks like we're gonna be reusing this, right, Alex?
Yep, that stays.
We're gonna be reusing this OEM, and it looks like the reason why they don't make an aftermarket, look how NASCAR this pipe is. This is not a round pipe. It does have OEM heat shield around it, so we've got this squished pipe going through the subframe here. And then we'll be replacing this resonator section here with an X pipe. So that'll be flowing straight through, so there'll be a lot of volume gain there. And obviously you could call these the down pipe right here. Obviously not a turboed car, but you can see they are not, I don't think they are round either. And they go all the way up to the headers, which are wrapped again, right there. I don't know if those are a tubular header. I want to say they are, but they are completely wrapped, so you cannot see anything. Other than that, I'm glad I took a look at this because now I fully understand why there are missing sections of the F12 aftermarket exhaust systems, even on other brands, not just Fi. There is no way an aftermarket is going to recreate this pipe. That is way too difficult and extremely expensive.
Not to mention the install cost.
You
have to drop the subframe.
Yep.
You can't pull that pipe out.
There's no way you're pulling those pipes out without dropping the subframe.
All right, we are ready to drop our rear muffler sections. I've already done the passenger side. We're going to move on to the driver's side. Not too crazy on these. We're going to remove this vacuum line off of the actuator. Remove this bracket that ties the two mufflers together. There are 3 hangers that all have a 10mm nut on top of them. And finally, the actual clamp. Let me find out. That is a external Torx and E12 for that clamp. As well as these are a 5mm Allen. So I'll get started and we'll shoot some video. Moving on, we are underneath the car. I'm going to be loosening up these 2 rear clamps on the mid pipe. And then there are some 13mm bolts on these rear hangers, as well as the 10mm on top. I'll see what we need to take apart to be able to move these back enough to get this mid pipe out, and I will let you guys know. These are 15mm nuts on the exhaust clamps. Gonna loosen those bad boys up. All right, I'm just gonna briefly go over dropping this panel. The reason I'm gonna do that is I'll have to back these kind of like intermediate pipes off to remove the mid pipe. We're gonna add the FIX pipe in there, and trying to fiddle this out without having access to move that back is gonna be difficult. So just kind of quickly going over dropping this. The brake duct is riveted to the under tray, so we're going to drop these hose clamps on either side for the brake duct. We're then going to remove these kind of wind deflectors for the tire. Those are a T30 Torx, and then the remaining fasteners are just these 10 mils that are all underneath the tray. All right, so I put the X pipe in exactly like we took the factory H pipe out. I fed it into the rear pipes first and then slid it forward onto the front pipes. It was much easier than getting it out, but still I wouldn't call it easy. Other than that, fits up great. So we'll move on to the rear section. I'm gonna go ahead and put these hangers back on these under axle pipes and get it ready to mount the rear muffler sections. Now I'm gonna transfer our hangers to the FI system, and then we'll get to bolting this thing up. I don't know if I covered it, but I tightened the downpipe side of the mid pipe and left the rear side loose so that I can get these mounted and make sure that they, fit where they need to, forward and back. These are quite the elaborate little hangers.
Okay, cool. Yeah, eventually input.
Best however many dollars Charles spent on it ever. Now that we've got our exhaust install complete, we're gonna go ahead and mount the tips in the bumper. We've got that on a stand over here. The factory tips have 6 M4 Allen screws surrounding them. I believe we're gonna end up having to cut this heat shielding right here to get access to these lower 3 bolts because this is rivet bonded to the bumper. We'll just go ahead and put that back nicely when we're all said and done. I'll get a couple clips of these going in. All right, so I went ahead and made a cut on these guys, pulled them back, and now we have access to these lower 3 bolts. Go ahead and get those removed and we'll pull out our factory tips. All right, we've got our factory tips out. Just give you guys a quick comparison of the FI tips versus the stock tips. The FI tips should fill the majority of the factory bumper hole, give this car a much more tuner type look with the burnt tips. Personally, I like this factory tips, but these are gonna give this car quite the aggressive look. So I'm excited to see what they look like in the vehicle. Definitely quite the upgrade. All right, I just wanted to get a quick clip before I have both sides in. We can get a comparison of these. Honestly, these burnt tips remind me a lot of like an R35 exhaust. I'm really digging the fitment on these. They fill up the entire bumper more or less, and it loses that screen behind the tips. I'm sure if these tips aren't for you, you can continue to use your factory tips, but I personally think these are an awesome addition. Just kind of sets it apart from every other factory car you'll see out there. So we'll go ahead and get the other side of tips in. There is the completed tip install. Look at those burnt tips. Wow. Awesome fitment on these. They fit perfectly. They only reused 4 of the 6 tabs, but they seem to be plenty sturdy, not going anywhere. Plenty of room for misalignment on the exhaust if you were to need it. Overall, I'm really happy with fitment on everything. We are finished with the tips. Gonna go ahead and start going on the vacuum routing for the valves. The F12 has factory vacuum actuated valves, so I'm going to be utilizing the hard lines that run from the front of the rear to the car so that we don't have to run vacuum tubing all the way through it. This line right here is the source of the vacuum that feeds these solenoids for the factory valves. I'm going to go ahead and install our solenoid upstream. Basically, this hard line runs through the fender well, under these under trays, and then goes up into the car under these panels. So I'm gonna be dropping this front panel. I'm gonna try to stash our solenoid and the vacuum canister up under this tray so that it's out of the way, not in the engine bay where it can get burned up or in the way of any future service. Looks like we've got some T30 Torx around the perimeter of this under tray and then some 10 millimeters to drop it. I will do my best to shoot the removal of this. So we're dropping this under tray. I just wanted to show you guys there's this small black hose that can just be pushed up out, and then these larger hoses have hose clamps. These are probably the drain for the cowl or something like that. 7 millimeter or a standard screwdriver. We have the same one on the opposite side. Once we get those dropped, we'll be able to remove the under tray. We are on to the controller install. I'm gonna start by routing the OBD plug through the firewall. The most straightforward way I've found on this car is on the driver's side by the brake booster. There is a wire going through right here at the top. This has a rubber grommet that I've pushed back. I've routed this baling wire through it, and when we come inside the vehicle, I have our OBD cable and my baling wire, as that's routed much further up in the dash. This is the most straightforward way that I've found without, making any new holes in the vehicle. So I'm gonna go ahead and attach the small end of the OBD connector to our wire, pull it back through, and then I'll be mounting the valve controller in this driver's side compartment. It should be free of water and be close enough to have Bluetooth capability in the interior. Unfortunately, I typically do mount the controller in the cabin, but there are no grommets large enough to pass the other connectors through to get everything inside like I've done on previous installs. So this will have to do. I'm then gonna run the remaining cables under the vehicle to end up on the other side where the battery is. I'll go through that in detail. Just wanted to show you guys how I accomplished this. I basically just pulled this wire back up using the wire that I traced through there. It's not too much of a complicated pull. Shouldn't have too much trouble with that. And that will get you your OBD into the engine bay. Next, I'll end up routing the cables underneath to the passenger side where I'm gonna attach the solenoid for the vacuum and our connection to the battery. So for a little bit of a cleaner install, I'm gonna be using some 3M Velcro. I'm gonna go ahead and mount this on the back of the control module for the exhaust. And then I'm gonna show you where I'm gonna place this in the car. We come over to our driver's side compartment right here. I'm gonna go ahead and stick this with our Velcro on it right here on the frame rail, basically, of the car. That way, if we ever need to come check our status, we'll just be able to open this cover. All of our wired connections come out right here, and we'll be able to be routed under the car and to our OBD sensor behind the firewall, and should be a nice clean install that stays dry and will be covered up once the beauty cover goes back on. So now that we've got our module landed, I'm gonna go ahead and grab our OBD connector. This guy gets plugged in on the left. Then we've got our harness that goes to the 12-volt source and our solenoid. That gets plugged in on the right. I'll go ahead and zip tie these cables up out of the way, trying to keep them out of the way of anything that might need serviced in the future. And we will move on to the other side. Just wanted to quickly come back to the interior. I've got our exhaust module plugged into the OBD port, and our slack is zip tied up as kind of tight as I can get it so that it stays out of the way of your footwell. Unfortunately, the Ferrari is kind of like right above the brake, but this should be fine and stay out of the way of the driver. Moving on to the electrical, we need to connect our leads for the 12 volt to the exhaust module. Being that this vehicle already has a GPS device on it and is attached on the ground and 12 volt, I'm gonna double up on those terminals with the exhaust module. Alternatively, it looks like this car has an unused terminal right here that you could jump on as well. We could also add an additional bolt onto the ground for this. So plenty of options. The other option would be to access the fuse panel in the passenger footwell and add a fuse if you're not keen on hooking it directly to the battery. The only difficulty with that would be finding access into the passenger footwell and then back out again our cables for the exhaust module. So I've finished connecting these. I basically just piggybacked what was there on the 12 volt side. I have our fuse removed from the fuse carrier just so that this doesn't end up arcing out until I have everything completed. I did end up adding a bolt for these. I just wasn't really fond of how it was landed on the ground for the actual car. So those have their own separate connection. I'm gonna go ahead and attach the extension leads to these and drop them down below so that we can hook them up to the module, and then we'll also hook up the solenoid for the vacuum. Just finished up wiring the controls for the FI exhaust on this F12. I have the main controller mounted right here on some Velcro so it can be pulled up if need be. This blue and green wire goes to the firewall and is plugged into the OBD port inside the car. The control wires are dropped down this side right here and run underneath the car. I'll lift the car up in a moment and show you guys that. On the other side, we have the fused connection for the 12 volt and the ground landed up here. These drop behind the oil reservoir and come down right where we have the solenoid mounted underneath the car. All right, underneath the car we have our control wires drop down behind the fender well from where the module is landed. I've got these routed through the OE hanger for the hard lines. I've attached some of these adhesive zip tie holders, and I've crossed it under the trans mount just to keep it away from the exhaust. I don't want any of these wires melting. And then once the under tray is under this, it'll keep everything nice and tidy. I went ahead and oriented the quick releases for the cables near to this so that if the car is ever serviced, you know, the service person doesn't get upset and cut the wires or whatever. That way they can just quickly disconnect them, cut these zip ties, and then put them back when they're done. I have our slack wire tied up in here behind all the hard lines. And then the fun part is mounted over here. Let me grab a light. So over here we have the solenoid mounted. I have that on one of the bolts for the lower mounts on the oil reservoir. Basically, you're just hooking up color for color on these. The blue and black wires are the solenoid coming from the controller. The red and brown are your 12 volt to the controller. Basically, I showed you guys earlier this hard line. That's the OE vacuum source for the stock vacuum actuated valves. I slipped that hose off and have it connected to the check valve. Kind of hard to see. The check valve is up in there. It's the white and black part. That's the OE hose right here with the writing on it. I've got that routed over and into the bottom of the solenoid right here. The outlet side of the solenoid that goes to the valves is teed to our vacuum canister, and then this is routed back to the OEM hardline. If we follow that back under the car, I don't have all the under trays off, but it's this gray line right here. It goes up over the wheel well, back through here, all the way to the back of the car right here. They have a T in it from the factory that used to feed these OEM solenoids, and I just went ahead and disconnected that from those and then disconnected the outlets of the OE solenoids and ran their T straight to these hard lines that drop right at the valves. So basically we're reusing a lot of the OE hard lines to keep this install nice and clean. And if the customer ever did want to go back to stock, they would simply take these off, hook their solenoids back up, come up here, disconnect where our check valve is, hook that back up to the hard line, and their system would be back to factory. They could easily remove this whole thing with no damage to the vehicle. Other than that, basically we need to just get the under trays back under the car, and we will have this thing ready to fire up and get some sound clips. So looking forward to that.
Alex, how hard would you say this install was?
Hard. Like this is probably like max DIY. Like if you're competent, you could do it.
Well, there you go, guys.
But yeah, it's if you question it, I would have a shop do this.
This is max DIY. So we got this car finally buttoned up after a couple days, you know, got a bunch of projects to do. And I'll have Alex kind of talk about the difficulties or any weird things that was noticed in this install. And we do have the valves closed as of right now, and we'll just cruise around and kind of get the volume of it. But take it away, Alex.
So install, as far as the exhaust goes, the mid pipe was fairly difficult just because there's so much overlap in the flanges where they slip fit on each other. The mid pipe was pretty difficult to get in and out. I kind of went over the best way I found to do it, but it's just a struggle. Once that's complete, I mean, it's not really that crazy. If you were trying to do this on the ground, probably borderline impossible. You need a lift for this job. The electronics and vacuum is a little elaborate, but I mean, once you kind of boil it all down, it's not that crazy. It's just a solenoid, a controller, a 12-volt source, and the OBD port. So nothing too crazy. If you have something to reference, it's going to be much easier than if you're just going off the generic stuff that FI provides with it. So, I mean, if you are keen on doing this job yourself, I hope this video helps you. Maybe you'll even find a better way to do it, because you're really kind of just making it up as you go. As far as routing goes, there's not really any like set in stone way to do it. It's just I try to find the way that's going to provide the cleanest result when all's said and done. Obviously this is a very nice car, so we want a clean install. Overall, I mean, it is pretty difficult if you're not like confident in your abilities or have done a similar project to this. I would say probably use a shop for this one. It's quite a lot more elaborate than most of the installs we do. So other than that, love the result.
So just doing our typical loop around here at the shop, man, the valve, when the valve is on, it is very quiet, but it has a much higher tone. And that same result can be said about Nyla C63, where some people say they don't like the higher pitch, where I absolutely love the higher pitch. And Phi kind of stays true to its kind of F1 styling here. I mean, you really hear the high pitch of this V12 and the F12. I mean, obviously you get a ton of intake noise, and I'm almost bored driving the car with the valve on. So we're about to get here to a main straightaway. We'll let her rip here, and then we'll do some external video of the car, and we're gonna kind of wrap this up, guys. All right, so we're gonna go open. So we're gonna use the Phi controller here. We'll press up, right?
Yep.
Let's make sure it's open.
Yep.
So a lot more volume. Car has a ton of sound deadening, so we'll see what we can hear in the cabin. Man,
nice.
Sounds pretty awesome. I'm more excited to hear from the outside. There's a lot of sound deadening in this car. So with the valve off, the idle is much louder. You can definitely hear the idle. With the valve on, it's a little it's pretty quiet with the valve on. So here's off again. sell burbles. They're hard to hear, again, but they're there. And I definitely want to capture that. Here's moderate. Oh, fuck. The downshifts are cool. Try. Still have traffic. We'll keep the cell phone rolling so we can splice the footage.
Cool.
Yeah, it's really loud at idle.
It sounds really good with the valve on and the going through the muffler. I think this muffler really does a lot more than the usual.
I really like the bass hit when you shift up and shift down. There's like this weird big bass hit in the muffler. It almost feels like the car wants to shoot a backfire. And some of you guys know Ferrari doesn't like burbles, but this car definitely burbles. Customer is going to love this. This is going to be a huge change. Last pull, and I'll be heading out to Oklahoma today. Go help Tim out at Hallett and a couple of his friends. He's pretty excited about that. Alex has got an EcoBoost Mustang to do some bolt-ons, and pretty good week overall. Had a bunch of installs. We did miss a video on a GT500 install. Things got a little hectic at the shop. All right, let's make it count. I think I heard a backfire finally. I think we got a backfire. So my impressions, Charles talking behind the camera, super pleased with this product. Fi has always been impressive. How was the fitment, Alex?
Fit great. Overall, no issues.
And you know, obviously we work with other exhaust, and I don't care how pretty it is, because honestly it's hidden under the car. As long as it fits, it's awesome. And if it sounds great, that's even obviously that's the #1 priority. But fitment is a huge concern, because fitment can cause a lot of issues installing and kind of rack that bill up, and we don't want to do that. So shout out to Fi for making an awesome exhaust. Love the polished look. Hope the customer is happy with these neochrome tips. They definitely make this F12 stand out. If you guys like this video, of course, click that like button. If you have something to say about it, leave a comment. And if you love what you absolutely see, click the subscribe button, and me and Alex will be back for whatever next install hits the lift.